It all started on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning in suburban Columbus, Ohio. I awoke at 6 a.m. as I did every day, the same way I'd done for the past 8 years. My name is Michael Anderson, a dedicated husband, a reliable manager at a local manufacturing plant, and a man who believed that life's pace was steady and predictable. I never expected that one unremarkable day would spark a chain of events that would shatter my sense of certainty. The sun filtered gently through the blinds as I sipped my black coffee in the kitchen. Jessica, my wife, was still asleep in our bedroom down the hall. We'd built our life together on trust, shared routines, and quiet evenings spent on the back porch watching the neighborhood settle into twilight. I had always prided myself on the simplicity of our life, never expecting any hidden storms on the horizon. After my morning ritual, I opened my email on the work computer, expecting nothing more than routine messages from colleagues and updates from management. That's when I noticed an email with an unfamiliar sender address. Its subject line read, "A matter to discuss." The message was terse, no details, just an invitation to meet after work at a nearby cafe. My mind raced briefly as I scanned the sender's name, R. Davis. I couldn't recall any professional connection by that name. I saved the email to revisit later, thinking it might be a misdirected message or perhaps a marketing error. I set it aside and headed to the plant. The day unfolded as usual. I oversaw production schedules, attended meetings with department heads, and even managed a minor hiccup on the assembly line without much fanfare. Throughout it all, the email lingered in my thoughts, a small distraction amid the familiar hum of routine. I dismissed it as one of those odd communications that occasionally slip through the cracks of my inbox. Nothing more. That evening, as I returned home, the sky was painted with the warm hues of a setting sun. I greeted Jessica at the door with a tired smile. Her eyes, however, briefly flickered with a reserved look before she quickly masked it with a casual, "How was your day?" I shrugged off the moment, attributing it to the exhaustion that accompanied her long hours at the law firm downtown. We settled into our customary post-dinner routine, sitting side by side on the worn couch in our living room, a space filled with memories of happier, simpler times. Yet something was off, a small, almost imperceptible detail. While Jessica scrolled through her phone with the focus of someone in deep conversation, I couldn't help but wonder what had captured her attention so intently. I told myself it was nothing, just another facet of our busy lives. I returned to my reading, losing myself in a paperback mystery novel as the quiet hum of the TV provided background noise. Later, as the clock edged toward 9 p.m., I found myself in the study, checking over some work documents. I heard soft footsteps approaching and, assuming it was Jessica, I looked up expecting a simple greeting. Instead, I was met with a look that was difficult to read, a mixture of hesitation and something else I couldn't quite name. Before I could ask, she excused herself with a quick, "I'll be in the bedroom," leaving me to ponder the fleeting moment of uncertainty. The next day, I awoke to a strange silence. Jessica had left early for work, a fact I attributed to her busy schedule. I found myself alone with my thoughts as I made breakfast and planned my day. There was an odd disconnect in our interactions lately, as if an unseen line had been drawn between us without explanation. I brushed aside the concern, focusing instead on the day ahead and the responsibilities that awaited me at the plant. At lunch, I sat with a couple of colleagues in the break room, exchanging stories about weekend plans and recent sports scores. One of them, Tom, mentioned an odd incident at a local cafe involving a R. Davis. Tom's description was vague. A brief conversation, a laugh shared with someone in a sharp blazer, and then a parting smile that hinted at secrets. I excused myself quickly, my mind now abuzz with connections I had yet to fully understand. Was it possible that the email sender and Tom's encounter were connected? I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling as I returned to work, focusing on production targets and deadlines. Yet the mysterious R. Davis hovered in the back of my mind. I wondered if this could be nothing more than a case of mistaken identity, or perhaps an invitation to something entirely benign. I promised myself I'd revisit the email that evening when the weight of the day's stress had lifted. That night, after Jessica had gone to bed, I sat at my desk in the study with the email open. The message was brief. I need to talk. Meet me at Crestwood Cafe at 7 p.m. R. Davis. There were no signatures beyond the initial, no further explanation. I leaned back in my chair, considering my options. Should I ignore it? Should I reply? I decided that a conversation after work wouldn't hurt. At worst, it would be a few minutes of harmless chit-chat with a stranger. Before I could act, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Remember our dinner tomorrow? I have a lot to catch up on at work. Love you. Her message was normal, devoid of any hints of trouble. I replied with a simple love you too and set the phone aside, determined to approach the situation with a clear head. I spent the rest of the night reviewing my schedule, planning my tasks for the following day, and trying to place any memory of R. Davis from my past interactions. Nothing concrete surfaced, only a vague recollection of an acquaintance from a networking event months ago. But the doubt persisted. The quiet of the night offered no answers, only the ticking of the clock and the steady hum of the refrigerator in the adjacent room. I knew that something was amiss, yet I refused to let it disrupt the order of my life. I turned off the study lamp, slid into bed, and tried to sleep, the image of that cryptic email imprinted in my mind. As I drifted toward sleep, the normalcy of the moment contrasted sharply with the mystery looming on the horizon. I was unaware that the subtle cracks in my everyday life were about to widen into chasms of betrayal and deceit, a betrayal that would soon turn the foundation of my world upside down. I closed my eyes, the gentle rhythm of my heartbeat a stark reminder of life's fragility, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Little did I know that by the time I sipped my coffee the next morning, the carefully maintained illusion of stability would be shattered forever. The invitation from R. Davis was not a harmless mistake. It was the opening line to a story of deceit that had been quietly unfolding behind closed doors for far longer than I could ever have imagined. Tomorrow, I'd set foot in Crestwood Cafe with no inkling of the storm waiting to engulf me, a storm that would lead me down a path of discovery, confrontation, and irreversible change. And while I lay there in the dark, the silence of the night seemed to whisper that nothing was as it appeared. The calm before the storm was over, and the pieces were already moving into place. The next evening, I left the office with a lingering curiosity about the email from R. Davis. I drove in silence through the darkened streets of Columbus until I reached Crestwood Cafe, a quiet spot on the edge of town. Its neon sign buzzed softly as I parked and stepped inside, the low hum of conversations and clinking cups setting a subdued background for what I hoped would be a brief meeting. Inside, I scanned the room for anyone who might match the simple signature, R. Davis. I wasn't expecting a bustling crowd. Instead, a few lone diners and a couple of quiet tables filled the space. In the far corner, beneath a muted lamp, sat a man in a dark suit, his posture relaxed yet alert. Something about the way he sat made him appear both deliberate and purposeful, like he was waiting for me. I approached his table, and without hesitation he looked up and greeted me with a curt nod. "Michael Anderson?" he asked, his voice low and measured. "That's me," I replied, taking a seat across from him. There was an immediate, unspoken agreement in his eyes that this conversation wasn't about casual chit-chat. Instead, it carried a gravity that belied the simplicity of our surroundings. He pushed a folded piece of paper toward me. "I know you're a busy man, so I'll be brief. My name is Richard Davis," he said, finally revealing what his initial R stood for. "I'm not here to cause trouble, but there's something you need to be aware of." I leaned in, trying to catch every word. "Go on," I said, keeping my tone neutral. My mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps he was a private investigator, or someone with information about a past mistake. But as I looked at him, his expression was devoid of any malice, simply determined. Richard Davis continued, "I've been watching a situation that, frankly, involves your wife." He paused, allowing the words to settle between us. "I'm not here to throw accusations, Michael. I'm here because you deserve to know what's happening." My pulse quickened, but I maintained my composure. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the knot forming in my stomach. I had to believe that there was a rational explanation for what he was about to say. "I've observed Jessica over the past few months," Richard began. "Not in the way you might expect, but enough to see that something isn't right. She's been frequenting places, meeting with certain individuals, people who aren't part of her usual circle." His eyes flicked briefly to the folded paper and then back to me. "I'm not here to tell you exactly what you want to hear. I'm here because I believe that if you're unaware of these activities, you deserve the opportunity to address them head-on." I took a slow breath, absorbing his words without letting them fully penetrate the calm veneer I'd built over the years. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. What's your connection to this situation? Richard's gaze hardened just slightly. Let's just say I have my reasons. I used to be in a similar position once, caught off guard by secrets I never imagined. I know the kind of pain that comes from betrayal. I don't want you to go through that if there's a chance to avert it. His tone was matter-of-fact, no overt sympathy but a silent understanding of the risks involved. I shifted in my seat, trying to keep my thoughts organized. I appreciate the concern, but if this is about my wife, why didn't she ever say anything? I asked, a hint of disbelief lacing my words. I recalled the small moments at home, the distracted phone scrolling, the fleeting looks that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Yet I had chalked those up to the pressures of everyday life. Richard continued, sometimes the truth isn't as straightforward as one would hope. People get caught in routines and the signs can be subtle until they become undeniable. I wasn't given all the details, but what I've seen is enough to make you question things. It isn't my job to judge, it's my responsibility to share what I've witnessed. I glanced at the paper he'd given me earlier. The document was unmarked, with a few typed lines detailing dates, times, and vague locations, snapshots of a pattern. There were references to a nearby hotel, a restaurant downtown, even a local gym that wasn't part of Jessica's usual routine. The dates overlapped with times when she claimed to be working late or attending client meetings. Who else is involved? I asked, trying to keep the questions simple and direct. Richard hesitated before answering. I can't give you every detail, but know this, it's not just chance encounters. There's a regularity to her actions. And while I'm not accusing her outright of anything beyond personal indiscretion, there's enough here to suggest that she's been leading a double life. Every word from Richard was delivered with precision. I listened carefully, aware that the conversation was building a foundation for something I had never suspected. The facts were laid out plainly, dates, times, and actions that painted a picture of a life Jessica had been hiding from me. But why now? Why come forward at this moment? I pressed, still trying to connect the dots without letting my emotions take over. Richard's eyes softened for just a moment. Because I believe you deserve to know the truth before it's too late to make a choice. I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here to give you a chance to confront this reality on your own terms. The weight of his words sank in slowly. The cafe's ambient chatter seemed to fade as I sat there processing the implications. For years I trusted Jessica implicitly, never once doubting the life we had built together. Now here was a stranger with evidence and a warning, a stark reminder that sometimes even the most stable foundations hide cracks. I folded the paper carefully and looked directly into Richard's eyes. I need time to think, I said quietly. This is a lot to take in. I appreciate you coming to me with this. Richard nodded, understanding that my silence was not necessarily agreement or disbelief, but simply the processing of a reality that shattered the image of my perfect life. Take all the time you need, Michael. Just remember, the truth has a way of surfacing eventually. I'm available if you have any more questions. I left Crestwood Cafe with the paper clutched in my hand, each step outside feeling heavier than the last. The cool night air did little to ease the tension that coiled within me. Every familiar landmark on my drive home seemed imbued with new meaning, a reminder that behind every routine there might be secrets lurking just out of sight. Returning home, I kept to my usual path. Jessica greeted me with her warm smile, completely unaware of the storm that was quietly building. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but every casual word and laugh felt hollow compared to the gravity of what I'd learned. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but replay the conversation with Richard in my head. The document lay on my nightstand, a tangible record of the possibility that the life I thought I knew was built on lies. I resisted the urge to confront Jessica immediately, uncertain if I was ready to face what might lie beneath the surface. Instead, I resolved to dig a little deeper to find out if there were any more signs I had missed in the everyday routine we'd shared. Tomorrow, I decided I would begin quietly piecing together the fragments of this newfound evidence. I owed it to myself to uncover the truth, regardless of how painful it might be. Until then, the mystery would remain. A secret between a stranger's warning and a husband's determination to find answers. That morning, I awoke before dawn with the weight of Richard's words heavy on my mind. Instead of heading straight to work, I took a detour through the quiet streets of Columbus, determined to piece together the fragments of evidence that Richard had handed me. I needed to confirm what I suspected without alerting anyone, especially Jessica. With the document still tucked away in my jacket pocket, I headed toward the local cafe and hotel mentioned in the paper. My first stop was a small diner near the hotel on Maple Street. According to the paper, one of the entries pointed to this hotel on several evenings. I sat in a corner booth, nursing a lukewarm coffee as I observed the entrance. I wasn't looking for any grand gestures or overt meetings, just the subtle signs of repeated activity that might match the dates and times on the list. A few patrons came and went, but nothing particularly out of the ordinary caught my eye until I noticed a familiar figure entering the hotel lobby. It wasn't someone I recognized from work or the neighborhood. His confident stride and the way he glanced over his shoulder suggested he was expecting someone. I jotted down the time on my phone and marked it against one of the listed entries. Leaving the diner, I drove slowly along the route I usually took to work, trying to piece together any connection between that mysterious visitor and Jessica's schedule. Every intersection and turn felt laden with unspoken significance. I recalled that Jessica often mentioned having late meetings at her office downtown. But now, I began to wonder if those meetings were merely convenient excuses. When I arrived at work, my focus was split between production targets and covertly scanning my surroundings. I knew that confirming what I suspected wouldn't be straightforward. Any wrong move could either expose my investigation or, worse, disrupt the delicate balance of my everyday life. During lunch, I caught up with Tom in the break room, his earlier mention of a rendezvous at a local restaurant still fresh in my mind. I casually steered the conversation toward his recent outings. "Tom, you mentioned something about seeing someone in a sharp blazer at that cafe a while back," I said, trying to sound offhand. Tom's eyes flickered with a hint of surprise before he replied, "Oh yeah, that. I didn't think much of it then. Just some guy who looked like he meant business. Thought it was odd, though. Sometimes people just cross paths." His nonchalance made me push further. "Did you catch his name?" "Not really. He introduced himself as Richard or Rich, something like that. But like I said, it didn't seem like a big deal. People have meetings, don't they?" I thanked him for the details and resolved to dig deeper later. After work, I made my way back home with an internal checklist of places to visit. The local gym on the document was my next target, a fitness center that wasn't on Jessica's usual route, but now loomed large as a possible meeting point. Inside the gym, the environment was a mix of clanging weights and upbeat pop music. I circled the perimeter of the lobby, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of unusual behavior. At the reception desk, a receptionist with a friendly smile handed out a schedule for upcoming classes. I studied it carefully, noting a few odd booking names for personal training sessions late in the evening. The names didn't match those of any regular members, and the session times coincided with some of the entries on Richard's list. I made a mental note to ask around discreetly at the gym the following day. That evening, back at home, I sat in the study with the document spread out on my desk, reviewing the dates and locations again. Each entry was a potential clue. A hotel, a restaurant downtown, a local gym, even a few seemingly mundane coffee shops that Jessica had never mentioned before. I felt a mounting pressure to gather indisputable evidence, but I was also acutely aware that any misstep might plunge my carefully ordered life into chaos. I decided to check the hotel's visitor logs online. A quick search for Maple Street Hotel Columbus yielded a modest website with a guestbook feature. I navigated to the booking section and entered one of the dates from the document. Surprisingly, I discovered an entry under the name Jessica M. Anderson. The date and time matched one of the nights I'd seen on the paper. My heart pounded, not with overwhelming emotion but with the clarity of a simple, undeniable fact. Jessica had been at that hotel on a night when she claimed to be at a work meeting. The next day, I arrived at work with a heightened sense of alertness. I watched for any signs that might confirm my suspicions while maintaining the facade of normalcy. My mind was a well-organized ledger of times, dates, and places, each now carrying a weight I couldn't ignore. Jessica greeted me with her customary smile when I walked in, yet there was a fleeting moment in her eyes that I couldn't quite place, an unreadable mix of caution and detachment. I decided against confronting her immediately. I needed to be certain before breaking any silence. At lunch, I found myself wandering back to the gym schedule. I casually spoke with a regular, a man named Brian, who had been coming to the gym for years. "Brian," I said as we both grabbed our water bottles after spin class, "have you noticed any new trainers or clients lately? I mean, Have you seen someone who seems to be here just for private sessions? Brian looked thoughtful. Now that you mention it, I did notice a few sessions with names I hadn't seen before. It seemed like they booked sporadically, mostly in the evenings. His tone was matter-of-fact, as though he were discussing the weather. I thanked him, storing away the detail for later comparison. After work, I drove back to the Maple Street Hotel. This time, I parked a safe distance away and observed the entrance discreetly from a parked car. I noticed a woman in a stylish coat entering the lobby around the same time that matched one of the document entries. I couldn't get a clear look at her face from a distance, but the silhouette was unmistakable. A deliberate pace, a familiarity in her gait. I snapped a few photos from a distance with my phone, careful not to draw attention. The images were blurry, yet they might serve as supporting evidence should I need to confront Jessica later. That night, as I sat in the darkened living room reviewing the photos, a clear pattern began to emerge. The hotel entries, the odd gym sessions, and the mysterious meetings. All of it was aligning in a way that left little room for innocent explanations. I realized that Jessica's late-night meetings were not merely extended work hours. There was a deliberate effort to keep a separate schedule hidden from me, built upon the facade of professional commitments and casual outings. I tried to rationalize the evidence as it lay before me. The facts were concrete. A hotel guestbook entry with her name, an unknown woman entering the hotel on a matching night, and the unusual gym sessions that no one in her social circle would typically partake in. Each piece of evidence reinforced the reality that my home life was not as I had believed. I leaned back in my chair, the document and photos spread out before me like a map of betrayal. My resolve hardened as I made the decision to dig even further. I needed to know not just the if, but the how and why. I wasn't prepared to accept vague explanations or half-truths. Every detail now pointed to a truth that was impossible to ignore. Before I went to sleep that night, I made a list of actions for the coming days. Contact the hotel for more detailed logs, discreetly monitor the gym session schedules, and even see if any acquaintances might provide further context. I knew that once I began this process, there was no turning back. The evidence was too compelling, the pattern too clear. As I switched off the living room lamp, the steady ticking of the clock seemed to underscore the inevitability of what was unfolding. The trail of evidence was like footprints in the sand, each one leading closer to a confrontation that I wasn't sure I was ready for, yet one that demanded resolution. I didn't feel an overwhelming surge of emotion. Instead, I felt the steady, measured determination of a man who had a duty to uncover the truth. Tomorrow I would take the next step, and with every passing moment, the facade of our perfect life was crumbling, leaving only the raw reality of betrayal in its wake. That evening, I arrived home earlier than usual. The evidence I'd gathered over the past few days weighed heavily on me. A series of documents, photos, and witness accounts that painted a picture of betrayal I could no longer ignore. Instead of heading directly to the living room, I went to the study and laid everything out on the desk, organizing the facts like pieces of a puzzle that demanded resolution. I could no longer postpone the inevitable confrontation with Jessica. There was no dramatic build-up or cathartic climax, just the reality of a life built on routine and the cold facts of indiscretion. I took a deep breath and made my way to the bedroom. When I opened the door, Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, her expression guarded and her eyes avoiding mine. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioner. "Jessica," I said, my tone firm yet measured. "We need to talk." She remained silent for a moment, and then set her phone aside. "What's this about, Michael?" I gestured toward the documents on the desk. "I've been doing some research. I found hotel guest logs, records at the gym, even photos outside the Maple Street Hotel. Everything points to you having a second life, one that isn't part of the life we built together." The tension in the room was palpable. There was no explosion of emotion, just a raw honesty that neither of us could avoid. Jessica's eyes flickered with something that I couldn't quite read. A mixture of resignation and something else I wasn't willing to let my guard down for. "It's not as simple as you think," she finally said, her voice low. I laid the documents down in front of her. "I don't need explanations or excuses. The evidence is right here, plain and simple. I want the truth. There was a long silence. In that moment, everything was stripped away. The comfortable routine, the unspoken assumptions of trust. I waited, watching her closely, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. Jessica's voice broke the silence. I never meant to hurt you, she said, a flatness in her tone that left little room for self-pity. It just happened. I met someone who made me feel wanted. Her eyes briefly met mine, and I saw a flicker of remorse. The room felt colder. So it was as simple as that? I asked, not needing embellishment or explanation. I wasn't interested in the whys or what-ifs, only in the facts. I found a hotel guest log with my name and yours, odd gym schedules and witness accounts. This wasn't a mistake. You planned this. Jessica's posture shifted. She looked away and folded her arms. I thought I could handle it, she murmured. I thought I could have a life that wasn't just about routines and expectations. But I see now that I was wrong. I wasn't moved by her words. There was no dramatic outburst, no teary confession. Just a clear presentation of reality and the simple fact that our marriage wasn't what I believed it to be. I'm not here to question your feelings, I said evenly. But I'm not willing to pretend that everything's okay when it isn't. I need to know. Is there any chance for us to fix this? Or is it time to accept that things have changed? She looked at me steadily for a long moment before answering. I don't have all the answers, she admitted. What I do know is that I made choices that led me down a path I can't ignore. I didn't think it would go this far, but it did. There was a brief silence as I processed her words. The confrontation wasn't filled with psychological manipulation or theatrical remorse. It was a quiet, measured reckoning. I realized that the foundation of trust had crumbled, and that rebuilding it wasn't an option if the truth had already been laid bare. I'm not interested in excuses, I said firmly. I'm interested in facts, and the facts are that you broke our trust. I spent days piecing together your schedule, your whereabouts, and your hidden meetings. This wasn't some accidental misstep. It was deliberate. Her shoulders sagged slightly, as if she had been carrying the weight of her choices for a long time. I understand, she said simply. I never thought you'd find out this way. I was hoping to fix things on my own terms. But it's too late for that now. I gathered the papers and photos, knowing that any attempt at salvaging our past would require a fresh start built on honesty. A start that now seemed impossible. I need time to think about everything, I said, my voice still calm, though the finality in my tone was unmistakable. Jessica didn't try to plead or beg for forgiveness. Instead, she nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Michael, she said, the words as empty as the room felt. I never wanted to hurt you. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun. I left the bedroom and retreated to the study. There, I turned off the light and sat alone with the evidence of betrayal spread out before me. There was no dramatic resolution, no overwhelming surge of emotion. Just the quiet acceptance that some truths, once revealed, can never be undone. In the days that followed, the routine of life continued. I went to work, handled my responsibilities, and managed my time without the extra weight of secret investigations. The evidence had been undeniable, and now it was time to make decisions about the future. I arranged for a meeting with a lawyer the next day. There was no anger in my words, just the clear necessity to address the situation practically. We discussed options, not in a rush of emotion but with the measured detachment of someone who had witnessed the collapse of a long-held belief. The process ahead would be long and filled with the details of splitting a life once shared. Jessica chose not to fight the inevitable. In a brief conversation at a neutral location, we agreed that the best course was to part ways, without bitterness or recrimination, just the cold facts of a relationship that had run its course. Looking back now, the entire ordeal was less about emotional turmoil and more about accepting a reality that couldn't be denied. There was no moment of explosive retribution, no dramatic outburst to signal the end. Instead, there was a quiet, unadorned confrontation, a straightforward reckoning with a life built on routine and the simple fact that sometimes the truth is unavoidable. As I drove away from the final meeting, I felt neither relief nor regret. I only felt the steady clarity that comes from knowing the truth. The life I had known was over, and in its place was the raw, unembellished truth of what had been. The evidence was there, the facts were undeniable, and the finality of the moment was as plain as the documents on my desk. In that quiet, final act, I understood that some stories don't need grand drama to be complete. They only need the cold, hard truth. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.